Hello, everybody, and welcome back to WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I am George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal. I'm joined today by Brian Chai, deputy managing editor, and crack reporter AJ Shasha, which I've decided I'm calling him now because AJ is a much better name for a crack reporter than Andrew. I think we're all agreed on that. That's, a no-brainer.
I mean, who wouldn't agree with that?
Right. So, we also have a very special guest today, my Tommy Bahama sweater, because it was 40 degrees out when I came to work this morning. And where AJ and I grew up in Massachusetts, 40 degrees in January is a harbinger of spring.
It's a pretty sweet day.
But in Phoenix, Arizona, it is the coming of the apocalypse. And speaking of the apocalypse, one of its four horsemen, Joe Biden.
Wait, which one is he? Pestilence?
He might be all four. I'm not. I'll have to. Well, no, because Nancy Pelosi has to be at least one of them. So
Nancy Pelosi's famine.
Yeah. I'll have to give that some. So I'm not
Let
sure
them
which
eat
one
ice cream.
Pestilence sounds good. At any rate, newly minted President Joe Biden on his first day in office essentially turned his back on his union member supporters, or at least on about 8,000 of them, in immediately one of his very first actions by executive action, revoked the permit for the Keystone pipeline. And this was literally on January 20th, the day on which he was inaugurated. Lost approximately 11,000 jobs is what that cost. 8,000 of those are union jobs. That's not even counting Canadian jobs, because I don't count Canadian jobs. I don't count Canadians, so I don't know why I'd count their jobs. But there's probably another 2,000 of those, but I'm pretty sure they're all paid by the government anyway, so I'm sure they'll be fine. The United Association of Union Plumbers and Pipe Fitters issued a statement that said, in part, in revoking this permit, the Biden administration has chosen to listen to the voices of fringe activists instead of union members and the American consumer on day one. Now, we could go into a whole list of why revoking this permit was a bad idea, national security, energy costs, all sorts of stuff. But this makes it seemingly a bad idea for the Democrats to do. Never mind national interest, just purely political. This seems like a pretty dicey move by Joe Biden. So a couple of questions for you guys. Let's start with this one. What do we think this foretells about the Biden administration's priorities and how the Biden administration goes about enacting or moving on those priorities? Brian, you want to jump in with that?
Yeah, I think it really represents that Biden is, I kind of joked about this on yesterday's episode, but Biden is essentially the class president who promises 3-day weekends and no homework, and once he gets elected, it's like, never mind.
I don't actually have the power to do any of those things.
It's really, it's both jarring, but also not at all surprising. I think a lot of people who, a lot of the people who are warning about a potential Biden presidency saw this coming a mile away. This is Biden's shtick, his grift, if you will.
I will.
And it's sad to see. I my heart goes out. Obviously, a lot of people have been hit hard with the coronavirus restrictions, a lot of lost jobs,
right,
and then just for like another 11,000 to evaporate because of one swipe of Biden's pen. It's sad to see.
Yeah, you just reminded me of something I'd forgotten a long time ago. I'm maybe 6th grade, 7th grade. Bobby Zielinski, running for student council, promised me new gym equipment. And even then, 12-year-old, whatever I was at the time, and I can't remember which. I remember it was Bobby Zielinski, but I can't remember which grade it was. It was middle school. But even at that time, 12-year-old George, whatever I was like, dude, you don't have any control over gym budgets. Student council is not consulted on that. I don't know how student council works. I don't know what they do, but they don't do that. I think that's a pretty good analogy. Andrew, would you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to. I think to piggyback onto that analogy, it's almost like he was elected and then immediately sold out to the popular kids. I mean, it pretty much, he went through this whole
thing. Which is what Bobby Zielinski would have done if I voted for him. Bobby, I liked you. You're a good guy. I hope you're doing well. But, dude, you did not get my vote in sixth grade.
Exactly. I mean, he swung for those middle American voters. He played on the I'm Joe Biden from Scranton. I'm just a middle-class, blue-collar family kid from Scranton, and immediately he turned, knowing that the Bernie Sanders wing of the party definitely solidified it for him at the end, I think. And I think he just turned and said, I need to pay it off for these people, for the future of the party, and to unify the party. So when Joe Biden talks about unity, what I've recognized in the last 7 days, he means unity in the Democratic Party. It's a unity that the Republicans don't currently have, and it is absolutely a unity he wants to play up so the Democrats can get what they want. I mean, under Barack Obama, I think that administration, a lot of people might not have noticed, but I think there were enough conservative harbingers saying, this is an administration and Barack Obama is a president who is far more radical than he allows himself to be. Just for political interest, he played a far more moderate figure as the executive than he wanted to be. I think he primed the keg, and Joe Biden gets to light the match at this point. And so his priorities are absolutely a progressive policy agenda.
So are there any consequences then to Joe Biden, to the Democrat Party? Do you think the unions just kind of sit back and let themselves be slapped around like this? Or are they going to, they issued this statement, which is, something, I guess. But do you think they do anything other than that? Can you imagine a union guy, a union organization, not a union voter, because those are different things. There are plenty of union voters for Donald Trump. But can you imagine a union organization washing their hands of the Democratic Party? Or do you see them, or do you think Joe Biden and Democrats are safe doing this kind of thing because they know no matter what they do, they can just kind of kick the unions down all they want and know nothing's going to change as far as their support?
Yeah, typically I think that the American political consciousness has got a pretty short attention span. I think that things are quickly forgotten. But I think in this case, I'm not so sure they are. I mean, we saw that a lot of these union voters, and even some union organizations in the blue-collar field, did take a chance on Donald Trump. And, maybe they saw, maybe they didn't see through Joe Biden. He is... Despite kind of his stutterings and his gaffing, he is a trained politician of 5+ decades at this point. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't see through him. So I think they took a chance on Donald Trump. They saw success, but they saw in Joe Biden a figure who maybe would have exacerbated that success and maybe would have given them a little bit more of what they want with a more traditional political figure. And I think that if they get tricked and this is what we're going to see the next 4 years, I think they'll absolutely move on.
You agree with that, Brian? Do you think unions are going to wake up to the possibility of another party besides their traditional Democrat support?
In a weird way, as I would hate to give Biden any sort of credit, but in a weird way, if he was going to screw over a section of that kind of traditional Democratic vote, it probably should be the unions. You mean just from a political calculation? Yeah. Because, me personally, and I know, I think I speak for a decent number of conservatives. I'm generally anti-union for a whole medley of reasons, which we could talk about this entire show. Where do the unions go from here? The guy who is constantly looking to, the candidate who's constantly looking to kind of deregulate them, take away a lot of their power and their sway, or the guy who might do that, but at the very least he's promising a bunch of free stuff, So, it's kind of a grim situation, but it does feel as if, at least on Biden's behalf, a fairly shrewd move, I think.
It'd be interesting to see what Biden's new labor secretary does with this.
It absolutely will, and I think that kind of, get on your point, Brian, it's the shrewd politics of it is that, like we're saying, I think Biden at least knows well enough that some of his decisions are going to need to be moderate or appear moderate no matter what policy he's pushing through. I think, the media, because of its reliance on figures and on figureheads, they're more willing to kind of see people than policy, and the policy just kind of goes in the understream and in the undertow, and on the top and in the headlines are these figures. And so these figures that we've seen from Joe Biden are admittedly in his cabinet pretty moderate figures, pretty run-of-the-mill, swamp creatures and figures that you would expect to be put in a presidential cabinet. Unfortunately, at least to me, they have been confirmed by the United States Senate pretty overwhelmingly. Now, that's only 4 of the 15 have been confirmed, if I'm not mistaken. By the time of this show being filmed, only 4 have been confirmed. We've seen Tony Blinken, State Department, Janet Yellen, Treasury.
We don't actually put anything on film. You know that.
We don't.
It's all digital.
It's digital.
We don't do.
Oh boy.
Where
do I find it all? I need to burn up.
I can make some tapes on beta for you, and I can send those to you.
I'd like them on VHS, but okay. Well, we'll talk about that after, I guess.
I'm just trying to help.
Avril Haines for Director of National Intelligence was confirmed, and Lloyd Austin for Defense Department. Now, the votes for these figures were, pretty substantial. The lowest votes in favor was 78 for Blinken today, 78 to 22. Yellen got 84 to 15. Avril Haines 84 to 10, and Lloyd Austin 93 to 2. Now, I would like to ask, I guess today, just where the fighters went. Did the fight just go out the door in the Republican Party that quickly? I mean, we saw under President Trump that his initial cabinet. And admittedly, Trump was not, he was not a swamp creature. He was not a shrewd politician. He came in and his initially forwarded 15, only 6 of them received less than 60 votes for confirmation. The Democrats were overwhelmingly against his cabinet appointments, and they showed it in their vote. Only 3 of the nominees received more than 90 votes. And not to mention the fact that Trump was forced to withdraw 6 nominees over the last 4 years, one of whom was in that initial batch. I think it was Labor. Then we saw throughout the years that his judiciary picks, particularly with the Supreme Court, were hard fought as well. Neil Gorsuch passes 54 to 45, Brett Kavanaugh 50 to 48, very slim, and Amy Coney Barrett 52 to 48. To me, that's appalling. For all the complaints that I had with Donald Trump, the fight that he brought with the Democrats was a breath of fresh air. I thought that, someone willing to admit that we get had by the Democrats all the time on the conservative side. We go out there, we are, because we support institutions and we support fairness most of the time politically, we are willing to say, what are the credentials of these nominees? Do they fit the bill? We will confirm. Unfortunately, the Democrats do not do the same for us. And that was a fight that we had over the last 4 years, right, in droves. And so I guess, to me, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more fight from the Republicans. I understand the institutionalist argument, but I think you can only go to the table so many times and get smacked in the face before you say, I'm not coming to the table fairly until you come to the table fairly. And I guess what I want to ask you guys is just, why is the Senate on track to confirm Biden's nominees on this bipartisan basis? Have they forgotten the way that Republican nominees were treated? Did they buy the unity, messaging from Joe Biden? Or is it simply that they respect credentials? Brian, what do you think?
I would say that the optimistic part of me will say that I think Republicans know that there will be many big, significant fights ahead. And this just might not be a hill worth dying on right now, because I will say I have a lot of friends who are probably like political moderates. They're neither Republican or Democrat. They register as independent, and a lot of them did lose a lot of respect for Democrats who just kicking and screaming about every little thing, especially during. I mean, let's be real here. Yes, a cabinet is important. Mm-hmm. In the grand scheme of things, I'm not convinced that's a hill worth dying on. To drag yourself through the mud like the Democrats did when it came to Trump's cabinet. That it just might not be a fight worth fighting. Given we've got at least solid 4 more years of Biden, and whatever policies and whatever shenanigans he's gonna, or maybe Kamala Harris. But either way, 4 years of blue leadership ahead, and those are going to be the hills that aren't just worth dying on, but need to be died on. And I'm not convinced the these cabinet members. I'll admit I'm not, aside from Lloyd Austin, I don't know a ton about the other three. I don't think that they are, like you said, at least credentials wise, I think they're all there.
I think that's key, Brian. I think there are three reasons why these passed as easily as they did. One's just the pragmatic argument. So there's very little doubt in my mind that, and I don't have any insider source that tells me this. I just look at this and I think, okay, they're just being smart. They're taking 4 of the, as you described them, AJ, well-credentialed. He's a crack reporter. Did I mention that earlier?
I think you did.
Yeah. They're well-credentialed. They're basically, swamp creatures of one sort or another. But these are folks with good resumes, solid resumes. And that's what the Senate is supposed to be looking at. What's their resume look like? Are they qualified for this position? Not, do I agree with them ideologically, politically? I recognize that that's not what the Democrats have been doing, but I'll get to that in a second. Pragmatically, I think what Biden has done is put forward the first 4 that were just sort of easiest to swallow for everybody to just kind of get this going. Let's just, let's save the fights for later. Secondly, realistically, I don't know what else you'd expect the Republicans to do. Vote against them until Biden puts forward a conservative nominee. It's not going to happen. This is what we're going to get. This is who he's going to nominate. And ideologically, it's who he should nominate. Biden won the election. He sees himself as having a mandate from the people to govern the way that he thinks he should govern. And what the Senate's job then is to advise and consent. And that's how it's written. It's advise and consent. It's not advise and reject. The rejection is implied, but it should be pretty rare. The idea is, is he just nominating his brothers and, his cousins, and it's all a big grift? Or do these people actually have resumes that say, yeah, they could do this job? And I would argue that in all 4 of these cases, that's who these people are. Now, none of them, to be clear, are going to do the job the way I want them to, except maybe Austin. General Austin has a pretty strong
record.
Yeah, strong record. So ideologically, I disagree with at least 3 of these choices, maybe 4 if I dug into Austin some more. But at least 3, and they're not going to run these departments. They're not going to handle this the way that I would want them. But truth be told, most of these folks, and probably Janet Yellen is the best example of this small group of 4, I don't want the government in the first place. I don't think there should be a Federal Reserve. So, we got to go all the way back to sort of first concepts of should these folks be here? Should there be a Secretary of Defense? Sure. Secretary of State? Yes. But most of the rest of these people who are going to be nominated or have been nominated, I don't want them or their departments to even exist as federal organizations. So, the question to me is ideologically is much, much bigger than is whoever. Janet Yellen going to do what I want as the Secretary of the Treasury. Yeah, and I misspoke earlier. She's secretary. I didn't want her in the past, is what I should have said, where she was Federal Reserve Chair. I don't want the Federal Reserve to exist, so I wish she didn't have that resume. We should have a Secretary of the Treasury. So you kind of need one of those. And also notice that these are 4 positions that are sort of key positions. They're not. He didn't start with like Secretary of Education, where I would argue federal government should get completely out of education 100%. They shouldn't fund a dime of it. They should get completely out of it. It should be completely local/state affair. I can't really make that argument about Secretary of State. So,
no, I think that's completely fair. I think on all the counts that you guys both brought, I would agree. I think pragmatically, these folks were going to get in. I think absolutely right. Joe Biden won this election. You do deserve, to a certain extent, the cabinet that you want. I said the same thing about Donald Trump. I guess kind of my argument is just I wish I wished to see a little bit more, a more aggressive approach. I would like to at least see, it's 50-50. They even, to your point, not only did Biden win, they even won in January in the 2 runoff elections in Georgia. They have the votes. And maybe part of this is just being a bitter partisan, would I like to see Kamala Harris called into work to make the 51st vote? Absolutely. And I guess my worry is, given the Republican Party's unwillingness to fight on some important ground in past years, in the years pre-Trump, does this signal, and Brian, it seems like you were saying no, does this signal that we're going to be weak on policy grounds going forward after this?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good indicator of that yet. I mean, there are also 11 positions left to fill. I would hope that if Biden nominates a particularly egregious one, we will see some of that fight. We will see some pushback. Like I said, with these particular 4, it's hard for me to get too fired up about. But yeah, I would hope that the fight's still there, and I think it still is. I'm not sure just because Donald Trump is no longer president that some of what he had brought to the table is no longer there.
I think the question you're asking is legitimate. But I don't think we can answer it well based on these 4 nominations for some of the reasons I've said. The other thing too, you do make a point that I think is, I wish it were valid, but I don't think it is, which is, when do we fight and adopt the same tactics that the Democrats do, and we say, okay, when you guys get reasonable, we get reasonable.
Yes.
2 things I don't like about that. One, I don't like it ideologically, and 2, I don't think it will work. The reason I don't like it ideologically is I don't think it helps the Republicans to become more like Democrats. I don't think that helps us in any way, down the road. Yes, there is the sense of Donald Trump was a fighter and got people riled up, and I don't disagree with that. But the very first thing that a fighter should be doing is picking and choosing his battles, and I don't think these 4 are 4 that you battle over. So like I said, I don't want the Republicans to become more like the Democratic Party. But in practical terms, I also don't know how helpful it is to say, when you guys come to the table, we'll come to the table, because 4 years from now, if there's a Republican president going through this process, it's going to be a different set of Democrats. Yeah. It's not going to be the same people. And I don't know that you can say to, this group of Democrats, hey, we expect you to treat us better in 4 years, and therefore we're going to treat you good now, or vice versa.
Yes.
Because 4 years from now, you have new people in office who didn't make that promise.
Yes.
They weren't part of that agreement. So, in practical terms, I just don't know that gets us anywhere. Yeah, I wish... Like I said, I wish that it did, but I don't know that it does.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. I will say there's one Democrat who has sort of caught my eye for her rhetoric. She is also from my beloved home state of Hawaii, which is unobjectionably the best state. Former Democratic...
I feel like there's some different ways that could be measured, and that Hawaii might not come out on top of all of them.
I'm from Hawaii. So.
That would be one of them. It is a beautiful... I love Hawaii. I haven't been there in years, but I think it's a beautiful state to visit, but I'm pretty sure I would not want to live there.
We'll have to agree to disagree. Anyways,
the sausage is really good. They have this amazing
Portuguese sausage.
Yeah,
it's a breakfast item, which is even better.
Well, and we have a large Portuguese
population in Massachusetts,
but the sausage is not the same.
No,
I did not know about Mass. Interesting.
Anyways, that was, I know, very helpful to you, our viewers of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal.
Those personality moments that they tune in for, right?
Yeah, that's what my mom keeps telling me.
Former Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, she actually found so obviously if you look at liberal media, they're still wringing their hands over what happened January 6th. Mm-hmm. Oh, these are the worst people in the world, right. Treasonous, yada, yada, yada. Tulsi Gabbard, however, has found a group of people that she thinks is even more dangerous and worse than them, and I will let her explain it in a video she posted to Twitter.
The mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th to try to stop Congress from carrying out its constitutional responsibilities were behaving like domestic enemies of our country. But let's be clear. The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, and the oligarchs in big tech who are trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol. Now, John Brennan said,
so I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Now, President
Even
Biden,
libertarians.
I call upon you and all members of Congress from both parties to denounce these efforts by the likes of Brennan and others to take away our civil liberties that are endowed to us by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution. If you don't stand up to these people now, then our country will be in great peril.
In great peril from not only fascists and bigots,
But also
but even
libertarians.
libertarians.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
Unbelievable.
So, George, I know when you brought us onto this episode or introduced us in this episode, you kind of mentioned the weather here in Arizona being a sign of the end times. Me finding myself agreeing more and more. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to be too effusive. There's still a lot that I disagree with Tulsi Gabbard about, but there are some things she's taught. One of the things she's not campaigned, but kind of worked on is transgender rights, or as far as keeping biological males and females separate in sports. Right. But that's a different topic. I also pretty much agree with her here, which is, not... Again, she is a Democrat, but she might very well be the smartest and most level-headed one.
She makes statements like that, and I think, literally, when I watched that video earlier, I thought, what is she doing in the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
I mean, that's... And so sometimes I think, and you're right, she has plenty of policy positions that I disagree with. We should try and get her on the show and hammer some of those out, actually, because I'm pretty sure I could talk her into my
Please.
into my positions.
Just tell her you know someone from Hawaii.
You think that would do it?
Yeah.
That position, sometimes I'm tempted to think she's only a Democrat because she's from Hawaii.
Yeah.
Like only because if you want to be elected and you live in Hawaii, you have to have a D next to your name.
Yeah.
That's not true. There are, in fact, she'd probably be unhappy to hear me describe all of her policy positions in that way. But yeah, that is what a politician should look like, in my opinion. I doubt I'd ever vote for her for anything.
Yeah.
But this is an individual who is willing to stand up to the craziness of the left and even the political operatives in her own party and say, this is what appears to be truth to me. And we need to, this is almost classical liberalism as opposed to leftism. These things are dangerous. We need to do something about them. And one of the things I really appreciate about that is that it calls her positions into stark contrast with those of so many others in her party and on the left who are either ignorant of the consequences of some of the things that they say and believe, or at least say that they believe, or are actually in favor of some of those consequences, which is probably even scarier. She seems to be, and I have not met the Congresswoman, but from every indication I've had for things she's written, things she's said, debate statements, all of those kinds of things, she just seems to be incredibly thoughtful about these things and unafraid to share what she believes is truth. And even if I disagree with you 100%, I have tremendous respect for people who are not just willing to speak the truth. Everybody will share what they think is truth. But to have thought about it and to actually express an opinion that has some weight behind it and not just what you woke up feeling that morning, which I feel is what so many people on the left do.
Yeah, I think the one thing from that video clip that I think I most disagree with is just her asking Biden for help at the end. Like, help's not coming from there. But I guess I really just have one main question I want to ask both of you guys is, so obviously some of the entities she's talking about, the Adam Schiffs, the John Brennans of the world, who are up there in, just the swamp.
Yeah,
like they
total
are
swamp creatures.
steeped in swamps.
Yes.
But it's not just them. It's places like Twitter, Facebook, other, she called it an oligarchy, which I thought was a very good way to describe what big tech has become in 2021. What do you guys think your everyday average Joe, like everyday Americans, can do to fight this? Because, the swamp is real and it's deep. Big tech is very much in their ivory tower. Sometimes it feels like they're a different species from us because they just...
Well, they are lizard people. At least some of them are lizard.
At least Zuckerberg.
Just go to YouTube and you can learn all you need about that.
Yes, that is true. But yeah, so Andrew, what's something you think everyday Americans can do?
I was going to say, you have to answer this one because I'll start preaching again if and when I get to this question.
I mean, I think this, as with many issues right now in the political sphere in the United States, the answer is a death to apathy. I think that just the amount of apathetic Americans that are just kind of I don't blame you wanting to get the heck away from politics, like the 24/7 news mill. Most of the time I want out of the 24/7 news mill. It's horrible for your mental health. It pervades everything now, and it's ruining a lot of things that used to be sort of apolitical. But unfortunately, you can't exist in apathy and also expect to be given true information rather than just propaganda and rather than just sort of what people are trying to give you, whether it's on the right or the left. Something that I believe it was Greg Gutfeld when I was really young. I want to say I was probably 14 or, I'm still very young, sorry. When I was a teenager, I heard Greg Gutfeld.
6 years ago. Okay.
When I was a teenager, I heard Greg Gutfeld say on Fox News, I'm 23 years old. I'm 23 years old. I'm pretty young.
4 years ago when he was a teenager.
This was early in my teens. It was probably about 10 years ago.
I was merely in my late 40s.
Oh, my goodness.
Merely.
Okay. When I was younger than I am and greener than I am today, Greg Gutfeld said on Fox News that the most important thing for young conservatives, and I think that this should be extended to liberals as well, for them to do is to read 6 news articles a day, find 3 stories, and find the CNN version and the Fox version of the same story if you can, if they have both covered that story. You need to be active in the way that you pursue news and the way you pursue politics. We just need a more, civically involved population, period. I know that that's hard. That's essentially a minor sacrifice on the part of all Americans, but the writings of the founding were incredibly clear that, a moral and religious people were necessary to proceed with the republic, and an intellectual, or at the very least an informed populace, was necessary, and that's got to happen.
Yeah. George, anything you want to add on to Andrew's beautiful soliloquy?
There's so much. No, so if I'm going to try and do this and not preach, Brian, I promise.
Okay.
From an older man.
I'm putting my pen down because it's harder to preach if I'm not holding my pen. So death to apathy, I thought, was a great phrase, AJ. So here's the thing. This is one of the reasons why social media is so dangerous. It's because social media, when you post or write, share an opinion, whatever on social media, you feel like you've accomplished something.
Activism.
And you've accomplished nothing. And in fact, mostly what you've done, and by mostly I mean like 99% of what you've done, is told people who already agree with you your opinion that they already hold. Posting on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter, I tweet, posting on Facebook, or any of these things, Parler, Gab, wherever you are accomplishing nothing by that, and it feels like you are accomplishing something. That's bad enough to start with. But what happens is you feel like, look at all these people on Twitter over the past 3 months who felt like we're an army, we're getting something done, and nothing got done.
No.
And it did not go the way they thought it was going to go, except for a tiny percentage of them wound up arrested in the Capitol. That's what they accomplished. And so it feels even more that disconnect between, like, I'm active. Wait, nothing's happening. And the lie is you're not active. No. Your tweeting is not active. Building up the number of followers you have on Twitter, not active, not helping. Probably counterproductive, but certainly not productive. It's not helping. There are two things you can do to help, and Andrew actually hit on both of them. One is intellectual, and one of them is moral. One, you can inform yourself of on the issues and write a letter, and I mean an actual letter, not an email, certainly not a tweet, not a Facebook post. Go buy some paper, do it by hand with your pen if you. Sorry, I'm going to start preaching. Do it with a pen if you need to. Type it out if you want to, but print it. Don't do this digitally. Have a physical piece of paper when you're done as a product. And mail that to your representative or your senator or whoever you believe the right person to be. Make it thoughtful and useful. Don't swear in it. Don't yell.
You will need to buy stamps.
Yeah, you'll buy some. Most supermarkets now will sell you stamps right there. You can buy a book of stamps. I can't tell you what they cost. I am an old guy. I should know that, but I don't.
They're a little pricey.
They're worth more than. They cost more than they're worth. But nonetheless, that's what you got to do. Write a letter. It is so much more effective. I got 2 letters today from readers, and I will tell you right now, I get dozens of emails from readers. I can't tell you the last time I got an email that impacted me, that I remember. I'll remember those 2 letters for months. It makes a difference, which is not an invitation to write to me, by the way. I've got plenty to do, but feel free if you need to. But if you want my attention,
I'll
write me a
take
letter.
the love letters.
I'm just saying. I'm going to tell Samantha you said that. But if you do want my attention, write me a letter. Don't email me, because you're going to be lost with the other hundreds of emails I get today. I get hundreds a day. So that's first. That's the intellectual piece of it. Know the argument, make the argument in writing, in a letter to somebody who can take some action about it. The second one is the moral and religious foundation of the country. I've said this over and over again, and I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. Politics is downstream of culture, but culture is downstream of religion. The origin of the problems in this country, not all of them, many of them, most of them, is a lack of faith. It's a moving away from the principles on which this country was founded. Now, I'm not saying you have to believe in all of those from a religious standpoint, from a Christian standpoint. You don't have to have that faith necessarily, but those are the principles the country was founded upon, and they are the only principles that are going to restore this country. And so what I have argued on here before, and will argue again today, is that foundational to all of this is prayer, that we have a God who cares about this country. If you believe that we have a God who cares about this country and is paying attention and is capable of moving on behalf of people who ask him to do so, which is what the Bible tells me he does, then we need to ask him to do so. And so I think the most important thing we can do, the most foundational thing we can do as everyday Americans, as you said, Brian, is we do not have the power as individuals to make much of a difference. God can do whatever the heck he wants all by himself. And he has promised to do what we ask him to do. So don't tweet. Write letters. Pray.
Can I keep tweeting?
Yes, and I'm going to keep tweeting too. I'm just not going to delude myself into thinking I accomplish anything when I do it. I'm venting most.
Yeah, it's a vent. It's exactly.
I'm at George Upper on Twitter. Feel free to follow me. It's about 60% frustration at something political, about 30% something odd that I found humorous, and about 10% Bruce Campbell references.
Yeah,
which is that's a pretty good recipe,
that's pretty accurate,
in my opinion. But those are the 3 things we should be doing, in my opinion. Everyday Americans should do those 3 things.
Cool.
All right. Last, and I'm going to take over Brian's topic for one quick question. Why is Tulsi Gabbard a Democrat? Do you agree with me that it's just she has to be to get elected in Hawaii, or do you think there are really sort of core democratic principles that that are really foundational to her political beliefs?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do actually think she leans a little bit more towards, like you had mentioned, a
classical liberalism,
as opposed to, she sure as heck ain't gonna hang out with the squad anytime soon. Well, maybe they will, but it is very much, because if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, George, you're a little older than me. The whole phrase.
I'm almost as old as Andrew.
Wow.
So, yeah.
But the phrase, I disagree with what you have to say, but I will, defend to the death your right
Absolutely.
to say it. Like, that's actually a liberal.
That's a classical liberal
position. Yeah, that's
position.
a classical
Absolutely.
liberal position, yeah. And it, I can see Tulsi be,
That's liberal in the
much
sense of
believing that.
liberal education as opposed to liberal versus conservative.
Yep. Yeah. So I can see that kind of being the, mind frame of a Gabbard. And like I said, I think all three of us agree. There's still a lot of policy stuff we vehemently disagree with her on. But when it comes to that stuff,
The thing about Tulsi Gabbard is I think I could sit down and have a conversation about those things we disagree on, and not end up in a screaming match. And I don't know that I believe that about too many politicians today.
You think you get into a screaming match with AOC?
It would be hard not to.
I would really try hard not to, because I think of myself in that sense as a classical liberal, really, liberal in the sense of liberty. Mm-hmm. And so I want to hear her, whether it's AOC, whoever it is. I always try to start the conversation by hearing, and I don't claim to be perfect at this. I fail all the time. But my goal in my heart of hearts is I want to hear first and then be heard. Yeah. So I'd like to think I could pull that off, but AOC would probably be a challenge. Speaking of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, I think we brought it all the way around now, because there's not much question that she would be enumerated among those. Maybe that's who the squad is. Oh, there are four of them. Have you ever seen
There's three in the irrelevant one.
Have you ever seen the squad and the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in the same place?
No.
Can't argue that.
I think we've proven it. And with that, because we're not going to top that, we are about out of time for WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Today, thank you so much for joining us today and every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I do have one ask to make of you today, just as we're signing off here, and that is, we know that just by looking at numbers, we can tell. Looking at YouTube, there are a lot of you who watch us who are not subscribed to our channel. And that subscription really helps us. So if you value what we do here, if you value the Western Journal and our efforts to bring truth to you, to your friends, to those of you who are interested in truth and not just spin, which is what we're always going to try to bring you, I'm asking you to subscribe to the Western Journal on YouTube. If you are not watching us on YouTube or maybe listening to an audio version of the podcast, please go to youtube.com/WJ Live. Find us there, subscribe, click the bell so that you'll be notified for every new episode that comes out, and we'll continue to do our very best to bring you truth and accuracy and not a whole lot of spin in what we bring you and how we see the world as very best we can. The other thing you can do for Western Journal, as always, is go to westernjournal.com/join and become a subscriber to the Western Journal. That is a way where you can help us where it really helps us the most, financially support our commitment to good journalism, to uncovering truth, and to sharing that with as many people as we can. To Tulsi Gabbard's, Representative Gabbard, to Tulsi Gabbard's point, big tech is a threat. It's a threat not just to conservatism. It's a threat to anybody they disagree with. Mm-hmm. One way you can help us is to join as a subscriber and make sure that you have unfettered access to our news and reports.
Reporting.
Crackerjack reporting, some might even say, by people like AJ Shasha here on my right. So a couple of ways you can support us. Please prayerfully consider both of those things. And we'll see you here next time on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. See you then.
Hey guys, huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Sam, we're going to need a slot for that story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.